On this episode of the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast Days of Our Cyber Lives, we celebrate National Social Media Day with a great podcast featuring guests from AIM and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, along with our favorite guest, co-host, and occasional guest, Chatrice Mosley-Romero, our Cybersecurity Program Director for the state of Indiana. So hop aboard the Bondcast, join in, and listen as we've got great content about social media and cybersecurity today. Welcome back to another episode of the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast, and we are in our Days of Our Cyber Lives series as we talk about the soap opera that is cybersecurity, living online, working from home, and the tips and tricks that you may need as a local elected official, someone working in government, how to navigate these crazy days of our cyber lives. And we are so excited for this episode to be joined with a fantastic panel, including our longtime co-host, co-guest, Chatrice Mosley-Romero, who is the Cybersecurity Program Director for the state of Indiana. Chatrice, welcome again. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, always happy to be here to help co-host and also be on the other side. It's fun.
That's fantastic. You never mind the crazy questions we throw your way, which we appreciate.
I expect it and hope for them.
Good. And we always look forward to your analogy. Each podcast has got a great analogy to some real life situation. So look forward to that.
Yep.
We are also joined this episode by Melissa Thomas, who is the Media Relations Manager for the IEDC, which in government acronym soup is the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. Ding, ding, ding. Got it. Melissa, welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So excited to have you. And Jennifer Simmons joins us as the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Director of AIM, which is Accelerating Indiana Municipalities, and really is the group that works hand in glove with cities and towns across the state of Indiana. Jennifer, so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, this will be great. Your perspectives will be so helpful for across state government to local government. And I know you all have experience that even goes further back beyond these roles. So let's get started. We're talking about social media safety today on this episode of the podcast. And social media, it's probably that thing we all live with, love, have a love-hate relationship with. And so maybe just to kick it off, I'd love to hear from the panel, maybe your favorite aspect of social media and your least favorite aspect, just to kind of get us rolling here. Anyone want to dive in on what they love or hate about social media?
Sure. I'm happy to, if you want. Yeah, so I guess I'll look at it not as much from a personal standpoint, what I like, but what I like about it for municipalities. What I always tell them is it's just the perfect avenue for getting your message out, right? So there are a lot of other avenues for getting a message out that you depend on other people to decipher what you mean, right? To quote you, to paraphrase you. In social media, you get to put your message out there exactly how you want it. And with the environment today of a downsized local media, there aren't as many ways to do that, and to be able to do it in your words, I think that's a huge bonus for municipalities that cities and towns didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago and beyond. So that's my key reason for recommending social media to municipalities.
I would say the thing I enjoyed was bringing personality. A lot of people assume government is cold, is stuffy, whatever idea you have. So it can bring a liveness to the agency. It can show personality. It can show that there are other things outside, that we are human and that we do respond and we do want to encourage. We want to be there on the lines with you, cheering you on. Especially when I was with OCRA, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, that was something I took to the moment I took over the social media. I said, I want to be able to show them that we're not just this cold agency in Indianapolis and we don't care. We do care. So it's a great way to have that kind of warmth.
So for me, I kind of similar, the warmth aspect, the connection. I also think especially for local governments and small businesses, they don't have the ability to hire a very expensive PR firm. They don't have a whole like team of 9 people in their communications division. So to be able to have things at the fingertips to make things and really grassroot it in a way, right? To be able to kind of do it on very minimum budget is, I think, an amazing tool. And connecting to your customers or the residents or your constituents or or your friends or your family, whatever the case may be, with the convenience of everywhere and anywhere you go. Something the love hate. So that's what I love about it. The hate about it is misinformation. So polarizing. A lot of people who hear one thing and then it becomes the rumor mill, and then people will take it as gold because it's coming from a friend. In public relations, when I first started in my career, it was in PR, and it was always kind of, and it still is true, word of mouth is still the most powerful from friends and family. It's still the most powerful motivator to change a product, to change a behavior. And I would say that is probably the thing that I struggle with. And I guess I wouldn't be a good cybersecurity director if I didn't say, in addition to the misinformation campaigns, even by nation states. So, I mean, people take advantage of the fact that we read, believe what we see. But I also would say using the things you post against you from a cybersecurity perspective, right? To be able to hook you in ways or to learn things about you. It's one of those things where it's, it really is kind of a duplicity of you're sharing things to be open and with people that you love and care about, but at the same time you're opening yourself up to being attacked and stuff. So the polarity of that is difficult sometimes, but most certainly is a love hate. I mean, I don't find myself in a mediocre, I can take it or leave it. It very much is like, I love seeing my friends and stuff, but then I'm like, everything I post, I have to analyze it and be like, how can somebody use that against me? And that's not a fun part. It almost becomes like work on top of it. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So a lot of positivity, controlling your message. I heard Jennifer say, just bringing that soul and that, the empathy and the realness to state or local government. It's just not a cold bureaucratic entity, kind of balancing all of that with, there's bad actors out there who may be kind of mining that for misinformation campaigns or spear phishing campaigns. Someone maybe jump in and talk about, like, how do you find that line and that balance of, you want to be honest and authentic, but you also don't want to, I mean, I guess, is there too much you can post, or where's that line in terms of what you don't want to say on social media?
Well, easy answer to the first one. I'm sure the ladies, you'll agree, there is absolutely too much you can post. Even working at Department of Revenue, I was the lead PR person there when we started the Department of Revenue social media platforms, right? And that was exciting. And I still was so amazed at taxpayers still putting their social security numbers on the Facebook page that's public. And we'd have to like go back and say, hey, we're not trying to delete this we hear you, but you posted super, like, they'll put like their social security number, their address. Like, it would always blow my mind because, and we'd have we'd have policy, please don't post, personal identifiable information. But I think people, are still in that transition of, oh, well, what can people do with that? And then, not realizing that they just like totally open themselves to a lot of things. And so I think it's hard. I think I can speak from the organization perspective for sure, from the perspective of how do you balance the openness and transparency of an organization in their social media platforms while still protecting even the people who may not feel like they need to be protected because they posted it, they feel comfortable with it, but you still have the obligation to do your best in protecting their information, their identity, even if they don't clearly, may not understand or know better, or maybe they don't even care, they're apathetic to it, right? But and so it really does become a hard thing to balance there. I always kind of think of, I always take it for, if they don't know any better, would this hurt them? It really is like, what would do harm, right? And that typically, whenever I'm doing social media campaigns or putting things together, even in cybersecurity, to Melissa's point, making it personal, right? And to Jennifer's point, connecting with people is what we want and need to do, especially in things like as dry as taxes or Or, yeah, I mean, how do you make taxes sexy, right? Well, you make it like, you make it personable. You make it like people want to know because they didn't know that they wanted to know until now you give them information. Same with cyber, right? Like I can go in there and say change your password a million times, but that isn't really how like people remember that, right? Like, but if I'm like, it's National Unicorn Day and getting something from somebody that seems too good to be true, you may want to double check that. Like people would remember that because it's funny to an extent. I mean, like a mom joke, I guess, but that's what my kid probably would say. But it still sticks, and so I think finding that balance of being human, being warm, but also not oversharing. And then in organizations, you kind of have to make the choice of where's the line to protect the people that are posting on your thing while still maintaining transparency. It's a hard balance. It's not, people who think like, oh, you just do social media for organization. It's a full-time job and it's a hard job because you have to make hard calls sometimes. So, but I'm sure Jennifer and Melissa have way more recent experience in that too.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points. And I think from not so much from a cyber perspective with municipal officials, but more from that emotional perspective, because we all know that people don't take it easy on their elected officials on social media, right? So they make the decision to maybe be a little vulnerable or to put themselves out there, and they don't receive a lot of that good feedback in return. So it is even harder, I think, to encourage them to put themselves out there in a way that is any more than just the very basics of what needs to be said, because the vitriol can be pretty toxic and it can dampen your enthusiasm for social media pretty quickly. So I think that they need to be really purposeful about what they're going to do on social media and sort of what they want to achieve, and very sort of pragmatic in what they are going to get in return. Because I think that it is a really difficult environment for that, for putting that emotional piece out there. And some do it really well, and some find it really tough to have that thick skin in these times. So not really the cyber angle you're looking for, but really when we're talking about the why a local official would use social media and what those gives and takes and balances are, I think that is one of the most difficult pieces to address.
And I think social media is a great way to, you can be vague. I always tell people it's better to be vague on social media and to take something offline if there's something very emotional. If I have somebody who's commenting a lot or they're hyper focused about something, it's easier to take it offline and have a more discussion than to do it virtually. Like that's just never going to get anybody any positive anything. So vague is your friend. Understand that you're still representing the mission of the agency. That's what I would always come back to, is knowing that I'm ultimately representing my agency and I'm representing the lieutenant governor, and I need to take that very seriously. So if there is somebody has a concern that I need to address, they need that personal attention. So that's another reason why I would always take it offline. And so stick to being vague if you have to, if it's something very, sensitive, especially. That's always something that I would recommend to a local elected official, is if you have to address something that particular, do it in a room in person and you'll thank yourself for it.
Jennifer, from some of what you said, I have the impression that you're still out there sometimes having conversations with local units about even whether to be on social, maybe. And it may seem to us like, that's just what everybody is doing. But I imagine there are still some folks who are trying to weigh kind of how and whether and what platform. And I guess, am I hearing you right? And then if so, how do those conversations?
Yeah, you're hearing that correctly. No, probably not as many of these conversations as we had, say, 5 years ago, when social media was really roaring 5 years ago, believe it or not. But there were still a lot of municipalities that hadn't yet jumped on that train. So I would say we have those conversations less in the last 5 years, but we still have a lot of them. And what we always encourage them to do if they're not on social media is really do an evaluation. Don't jump in, look at what are your needs? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, don't do it because someone told you you should. Do it because you've done a little bit of a look-see at what you want to accomplish and what audience are you trying to reach? What's your vision for your page or your pages? Do you have someone that can manage it in a reasonable way that you can accomplish all those goals you just set out? So we really encourage, like, we can do whole workshops on this, on how to evaluate the platforms and determine what's best for you once you've done a lot of pre-work. So it's by no means an easy decision for them just because someone says, oh, you really need to do it. I mean, I think they do really need to do it, right? But they should really do some homework first. And I think, when I look around at municipalities that are using social media effectively, you can tell they've done their homework. They're really purposeful. They are really strategic. They may have multiple pages depending on the audience they're trying to reach or the vision, or the goals. So I often will pick 4 or 5 of those. And if someone's trying to decide what direction to go, say, get on social media and follow these great examples, and that might help guide you, forward. And we've got folks that use it for things as simple as traffic, posts and road closures, and some that are doing Facebook Live for every meeting and every event and every announcement. I mean, we really run the gamut in terms of users, and I think that that's what's so great about it, right? You can use it a little bit, or you can use it for everything. And I love having those conversations with our members to decide, what might work best for them and help guide them through that process. I think it's a lot of fun, and then to see where they come out on the other side. And like I said, we're having fewer of those now, which is probably a good thing, but it is fun to watch them grow and really embrace the mediums that are out there.
Did you get a lot of questions during COVID when everybody was forced to, I think, rethink their strategies and say, we have to connect with our folks outside of what we're doing? Were you getting a lot of those saying, help, we need your help?
Yeah, that's what we got a lot of questions on, like, was that Facebook Live and kind of into that virtual meeting space. Like, can we use social media to broadcast our meetings? And we had a lot of those questions during the pandemic. And yeah, a lot of people that were looking for more avenues. Maybe they were just on Twitter and they decided, should I be on TikTok? Should I be on Snapchat? Should I be, should I be on Insta? Because really, if you think about it, most cities and towns are just Facebook, maybe Twitter. You're not seeing a lot of them en masse gravitating to those other platforms. So during the pandemic, it was a good time for them to look at something new because they had a broader audience to reach, right? Not just probably the typical audience they had targeted, but now they needed to reach everyone because town and city hall, they were closed for periods of time. So yeah, definitely.
And it becomes really hard, I think, when it comes to, and I think this is perfect timing because National Social Media Day is next week. And so, or I guess today, pending when we post this, but it's the end of the month of June every year. And so I think it's a good time for us to kind of, to your point, Jennifer, like reevaluate our strategy and why we're using it. And I think even the things people did during COVID and lockdown may not be appropriate once we reopen things, right? I mean, so then there's also a component where like, okay, that's what you did, but is it sustainable, right? And are you able to manage it now that you're back in office and you have those connections? Because I think some people also found themselves to have a little bit more time, right? Because we weren't able to, not maybe during the day, because I know that my job just got crazier and busier, but we weren't able to go and do things on Saturday and Sunday, and we weren't able to go to do like things in the evenings and stuff. And so, you find yourself, and yeah, TikTok did really well, but also, I would caution that TikTok also was, I mean, military took, they said no TikTok on any of their devices because it was a nation state problem with China. My kids, to my like super uncool credit, was, I mean, they had to come off TikTok. We had to take it off our devices, and so I think it's also important that there is, for everybody to know that one, and I know it sounds very like everybody says it, right? But if it's free, it's not really free. You're paying something. And, a lot of the debate that's going on with government officials, personal business is, Facebook Live is awesome. And to your point, like if you're a municipality, right, and local government, you don't have any money to buy, licenses for really fancy, WebEx Unlimited or
Right.
Zoom Unlimited, right? So, okay, well, now we have Facebook Live, it's totally free. I just got to sign up, right? And so why would I not take advantage of that? Why would I take advantage of Twitter Live, right? Live streams. So it really, it's they're good hooks in, but there's still a lot of caution of like, don't get too comfortable. And that if it's free and it sounds great, that's awesome. And I think there's benefits to it. I don't think they're maliciously just, trying to take down the Society of America. I really do think that it all started off with a let's connect and stuff. And I also think it's fair to say that like Facebook was like, it came out in 2004. Twitter, I think, was like 2006 or 7. I mean, this is still like under 20 years old, right? And then like, so when you're talking to people about like who's like was 30, 40 years old at that point, a lot of times they're, elected officials are older, right? And stuff like that. So, or, to Mark's point, or, with broadband or areas that are getting internet, enough to actually now have the ability to do live streaming and things like that. I think we forget, I know sometimes I forget being so close to a metropolitan area that there are parts of Indiana that doesn't have internet, right? They still struggle, or the little they do have is not enough to actually be engaged in it, right? So I think we have an opportunity to make sure that when those areas come up because of the great broadband initiative Lieutenant Governor and the governor has, we need to also educate people. We're like, okay, now you have all this access. So it's kind of back to 2004, right? Like, okay, now everything's wide open. So what are the best practices? So like to Jennifer's point, like being like having a plan and, knowing your audience and, that kind of thing, I think is really important. But also I think there's something important to say for the security perspective of your professional life and your personal life, right? Some people combine it, and that's fine if you're kind of basically like going to be strict and you're acting like basically like I have LinkedIn, for example, but whatever I post on LinkedIn, I know that like, or Twitter, like I post it as though I'm at work because I'm not, so whatever I'm posting, I don't post personal opinions. I don't post, anything like that. Typically my Twitter personal account is all about cyber anyway, because it's my interest right now. But, I always have to kind of consider that. But if I decided to be more personal on it, I would have a separate account that's locked down that, only the people I know on there are people I've met, not people I just am curious about or whatnot. So my friends are really my friends. I think we get kind of caught up on the friend like label, and it's not the same, right? And then, I think if you're doubting, should you put it up there, then don't put it up there, right? And the basics, like don't ever post anything when you're angry, don't ever post anything when you've drinking a bottle of Merlot, like just the basics of like
that's no fun.
Yeah, I know, right? I really, like I said, I'm just super unfun at home. When I tell my kids, put down the social media if you're crying. So especially teenage girls.
So doing that kind of edit, you could also take a step back and say, well, did we reach a broader audience because we use a virtual method? Are we more engaged with our constituents because we are online? Not everybody can go physically to a city hall for a meeting because of travel or kids' requirements or whatever. So maybe they are also doing a better job of being transparent because they have that virtual option. So you may want to think about surveying your constituents or talking to them one-on-one or do focus groups or something that along those lines to say, if this is really good because it came out of the pandemic, let's maybe talk about continuing it so we do make our public meetings all virtually accessible as well as holding them in person. So it's a good time, like you said, to kind of reevaluate and then think about, yes, we were forced to do it because of the pandemic, but let's talk about what was actually good.
Yeah,
I think
accessibility
that's
is
such a great
important.
point.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is.
We have been having that discussion at AIM because the pandemic, there was so much suffering that it does feel strange to say there were good things to come out of it, right? I mean, there's a lot of suffering there. We all have family and friends that suffered, but there were some things that we learned that were positive, that maybe we weren't delivering service in the way our members needed. So it's hard for people to get out of the office, but we also want them to have continuing education. So not having everything where you have to drive there and give up an entire day in the office, we can provide it in smaller bits on their computer. Do we have to do that all the time? No, but we learned that they found that really valuable, and I think that's something that will continue into the future. So I think it's the same with social media. There are some things we learned that will be really valuable and serve us well, but you're exactly right. I think those probably aren't sustainable, and they probably shouldn't be sustainable going forward, for various safety and security reasons or whatever. I think that at least now, heading into their next budget season, I think you will find people maybe prioritize technology in a way that they haven't before, right? Because they learned how beneficial it can be for community engagement. So I think you'll even see smaller communities prioritizing technology in this cycle. That'd be an interesting analysis.
Yeah, that would be. And I think it also would be interesting to see, because I think you're right. Local governments, especially, right? I mean, people are already super strapped, and it was always a
Mhm.
struggle, like from a role of at the state, or even in my role now. Like, how do I get, like, the people who need it most are the people who can't get to the seminar or who can't travel to Indianapolis, or even when we do regional things, they can't travel 3 counties over and spend a whole day on to get away. But then you also have to outweigh, like, what's the effectiveness of those things, right? Because you do lose a lot when you're just doing digitally. People are distracted, people are,
Yeah.
so you're going to have to, like, I love your survey, like, know your people, right? Because there are some communities that are like, I want things in person, because we're a tight knit community and we miss each other and we get a lot more done together. And then you're absolutely right, there's going to be communities that are going to be like probably a hybrid, right? Which I like the hybrids ideas, because I think you kind of meet
Mhm.
everybody's needs at that point. But I would say, caution, just remember Facebook Live, if you're online, it all can be recorded. It's all, nothing's ever deleted. When you're once posted, always posted. And I think we all heard the awful, like, Zoom stories or the Microsoft Teams stories, when people were like not appropriate on it or doing things they shouldn't be doing and thinking their camera was off, or they're saying things they shouldn't say. And nobody wants to be that story, right? So I always kind of
Right.
just assume cameras are rolling, treat social media like you do a media person, because that's who could
Mhm.
be on the other side. So say things like you're on, the, WRTV, right? And you're like being recorded and it's going to like go live somewhere, right? So, always just kind of have that guard up, but, to Melissa's point, being personal and showing that there is a human behind this, just like there's human on the other side of the screen, I think is important to recognize. And I think people are more empathetic when you recognize that. Unfortunately, public figures, and I think we talked about this, Mark. I mean, that's like a whole other level though, because Jennifer brings up a good point. There's a harshness to public figures, that's clearly another person and human being. But if you
Mhm.
put yourself out there as a public figure, elected official, there is I think a coldness from the public. There's an expectation, almost like an organization, right? Like a business, where you're like, well, still, you got to do it this way. And, they're just human too. So I always respect any elected official, because I would say that I'm very comfortable to be behind curtains, and I think I'd have to revisit a lot of things I do, and say if I had to be like on all the time. And that's a hard thing to have to give up when you decide that you want to serve your community and your state. And it is, you're giving up quite a bit of privacy, and also you're giving up how you're treated almost. But
Yeah.
I think, for a lot of those people, the ones I talk to at least, the benefits outweigh that kind of not so nice part, right? That they are making a difference, that they are doing something, and they have to just stand by what their convictions are and, be honest. And I think people are always, kind of come out the other side of it. So
This is amazing ground that we're covering. And I want to go back to a point, Shatrice, that you made kind of about TikTok and just some of the platforms and some of the nation state concerns that maybe we're all vaguely aware of. And look, I'll ask the question because I don't know. Is there any particular vulnerability just to having Facebook, a Twitter, a Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, like the app on your phone or your device? Does that open you up to a vulnerability, or is it more about how you use and how you post and how that information is mined by the bad guys? Is it an either or is it an and?
that's a great question. It's both. So,
Really?
if you have, like some things like, and it's not just nation states, it's predators too, right? I mean, I'm a parent of 4, and, when my kids are like, I want to have Snapchat, I'm like, no, you're not going to have Snapchat, because the whole thing, like everything disappears in 24 hours to one, nothing ever disappears, but it creates a whole other level of, why do you need anything to disappear in 24 hours? That adds a whole other level of questioning, right? Or, knowing where, like the vulnerabilities on the back end. At one point, Snapchat was, even though it didn't even have a setting, it always shared your location. Now they fixed that, but when they do things, sometimes that reverts back to share location. And when you have a lot of kids and teenagers on there, I mean, that's like prime, like, and they're on there at 1 o'clock in the morning. I always kind of go back to the, like, would you let your kids be outside in the middle of the street on dark corner at 1 a.m. in the morning? No, then you shouldn't let them on their social media platforms, because the only other people on there at 1 a.m. are people who are going to cause problems or people who are looking for kids, right? And so, it's kind of using those kind of, what would you do in a real situation? Would you let your kids like talk to strangers? Then they shouldn't be doing that on social media. It's easier, yes, and it's more like, I guess, what you would say part of culture, but it really isn't. It's just part of the, like, again, we're less than 20 years, right? So it's almost kind of a novice approach of how you're like, let's share with everyone, and then realize I shouldn't be sharing with everyone. But I would say for anybody on the public official side, on the government side, and then most certainly personal, like I have to have a Facebook page, because you have to have a personal Facebook page to manage a business Facebook page, which I hate, because I hate having Facebook.
Space. Yeah.
Yes, I do. And I really try to go around it. I even and I couldn't, and it just sucked, because I've not been on Facebook for like 10 years because of like people just getting for reasons. But so I had to finally break down, because I was like, okay, but we're still reaching an audience, like, right to their point, right? Always thinking about your audience. Okay, if I want to reach students, if I want to reach senior citizens, if I want to reach families, they're on Facebook. They're not always on Twitter, right? So knowing your audience, and so I'm like, okay, we just got to break down and do it. Now, I'm not engaged in that platform at all. I literally have that just to have the thing, but I still hate that it's out there. But I think anytime you have to do that, know your settings, lock everything down. If there's an update on the app, go back to your settings. And I would say, like, once every couple of months, just put it on your calendar, check settings, and make sure your stuff's still private, location is still locked in. I really think Apple's doing a great job at the privacy stuff, on like letting you know, hey, this app wants to track your stuff. Because all of that in the back end, it can be dangerous if it's led by a nation state, like behind an American company that's actually, a subsidiary of like, China or Russia. And that happens a lot with these apps on our phone. Always do research and look to see where it is, and just pay attention if you start seeing news about certain things. I think it's a solid thing. If military is saying, I don't want it on our stuff, you shouldn't have it on your stuff. Because people may think, well, it's just me, like little old me, and in like little town Indiana, nobody's going to go for my stuff. But they absolutely are counting on everybody to say that, and you are the target. And the more they collect for holistically, the more they can attack our nation and our state. So I would most certainly say to our audience, especially being in local government, that you are most certainly on target, because local governments from a cybersecurity perspective are being attacked tenfold of what they were just a couple of years ago. And a big reason is they're going after the people, not the organization, to get into the organization. So if you're on social media, like I said, I don't really believe in the like just drop social media and be off. I think it's just a matter of just do it responsibly, kind of like when we drive, right? It's a privilege. So know to put on your seatbelt, know to lock your, lock in your privacy, right? Know to like look around. Don't let strangers in your car, right? I mean, like, why would you let strangers in your car? And tell them all your whole life story and your social security number. Like, don't do that, right? So and know that you can do the best that you can, and sometimes identity theft happens sometimes, but at least you didn't enable it the best that you could on your side, and you can protect and know your stuff. So I would say it's both, and to just be cautious about it. And if you hear consistently from organizations you trust, like schools, our school, like they have like the welcome parents, and they will actually in their presentation say Snapchat, very dangerous. If your kid has it, we highly recommend you delete it, right? Because they have so many problems with Snapchat, like having like bully issues because it goes away in 24 hours and he said, she said, and it causes a lot of like issues for kids that, gosh, it's already hard enough being a kid, right? Definitely is hard being a parent to a kid. So why do we add more to that thing? So it should be fun. It should be empowering. It should be, transparent. It should be, honest and stuff. And if isn't that doesn't make you feel good, you shouldn't. I mean, right? I mean, I like a
Let's get Melissa in here. Melissa, I saw you reacting a lot to the having to have set up your own Facebook page, for example, in order to have a corporate or a public or a government page. And
yeah, I had to do that when I was at Okra, and what I ended up doing was my full name was attached to it. I ultimately thought of a way, if a reporter is Googling my name, that one is going to come up first instead of my personal pages. So I hid my personal page separately on purpose. So if a reporter or a constituent is looking for me from the government side, they find the right page. So that's another way you can kind of think about it, is hide your personal stuff, but keep a professional side attached to a community's page if you need it. What I also would tell communities is the good thing with Facebook and Twitter, they have great analytics involved into the app. So a good point to what Chase was saying is know your audience, look into those analytics, look into those insights that can tell you your demographics, when they're accessing it, where they're accessing it. And that's a great tool. And a lot of people think you have to pay for that service, but that's included in it already. And I highly encourage any community to use those and do it often, like maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter. And then that way, if you see that there's a platform that's not being utilized, you might get rid of it. If your community doesn't use Instagram, but they really use Facebook. I saw from an Okra standpoint, a lot of communities, we got the most interaction on Facebook across the board. Even though we had all three, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, Facebook always outperformed. So we did a lot of targeting on it. We did a lot of videos because we knew our audience was seeing it. So I would always recommend that to any community who's thinking about it.
So you're saying I should not spend as much time on LinkedIn. That's what I'm hearing.
So it has its pluses too. So
big fish, little pond, right? Well, as we get near the end here, maybe let's futurecast a little bit for local units, for state government, even for those folks that you work with. Where do you see the use of social media going? Maybe that's a new platform, or where do you, just open-ended question, where do you see social media with regard to how government communicates? Jennifer, you want to step in?
Oh, I'll try, but I feel like probably I don't see a lot of changes really. Now, maybe increased usage of existing platforms, because like we learned a lot during the pandemic about what was possible and what we could be doing to maximize our presence and to foster engagement with our citizens. But governments they're not the leaders and things like that. That's not what's expected of them, right? That's not what people think of when they think core public service, core municipal service. They want public safety, they want safe streets, they want parks. So they don't necessarily want their local government to be spending their time on social media, right? They want you taking care of those core services. But what social media is so great about is it can tell you all about the wonderful services you're receiving for someone brought up, please just tell me what you're using my tax dollars for. That's a great use of social media, right? Is to get that message out. It's like, here's what you're getting for those hard-earned dollars that you're paying. So I don't see us, our members out there looking for platforms and new avenues. I see them always looking for ways to utilize what's there to its maximum potential. So, that's probably my best prediction, is just continuing to make the most of what's there.
Yeah, I agree, especially during the pandemic when we were having daily briefings, we were sending out messages were coming in all the time, and we're always putting out information. I think it showed us that it's necessary to make sure that we're sending everything as quick and real time as we possibly can. I think local elected officials saw that too, or even just recently with the floodings that were going on. I know Decatur County had it and Bloomington experienced it, and they were able to tell people, these roads are closed, avoid these areas, it's for your safety. So I think it's only going to increase. And if anything, I think the state is going to put, as you've seen it with the Governor's Next Level Connections program and a few others, we need to get more broadband available. I think that's the biggest push you'll see with government, is they want to make sure every area of the state is connected online, no matter where you live. So you can choose to live where you want and don't have to be hindered by your broadband connection.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to be the doom and gloom.
Oh no.
Get ready. Oh,
you've
okay.
already got me ready to march up the stairs and get my teenager's phone out of this little hand.
So in the next several years, what we're seeing from a bad actor perspective is misinformation, and really using things that public officials are posting against them, and then confusing the messaging and confusing what government's putting out. So we saw that a lot with elections. We saw that a lot with COVID pandemic stuff, where people had to basically, even our leaders, we had to basically put a disclaimer, right? We've never had that until this last year, where now all of a sudden, if you put anything COVID, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook will automatically put a disclaimer saying, go here to the CDC, a trusted source for more information. Basically, don't listen to anything they're saying because you need to go check it over here, right? So don't trust and verify, right? So I think misinformation campaigns and the real social engineering manipulation of bad actors is going to continue and get worse. I think AI is going to be bad. So there's going to be campaigns, and I don't know if anybody's heard about deep fake, but we're going to see that more with public officials. So I think that would be of interest to local governments, where people can basically use images that they can find online of you, and basically you can look like you're truly giving a outrageous statement, something that can completely tank somebody's career in a 30-second viral video. Now the Tom Cruise one was great and it looked really real, so I would definitely say deepfake Tom Cruise to see how realistic it can be. But we've already seen deepfakes of other political officials, and I think that's going to have an end as we start seeing misinformation. And then how can people not believe it if it's their political person seemingly saying the same thing? So I think there's going to be a lot more manipulation on that side of things. And I also think when we're looking at local governments and small and medium-sized organizations, again, the information you put out there, you're going to see finance directors getting an email from the CEO saying, hey, I'm on vacation, I forgot some financial information for a transaction, and they know, the bad actor knows that they know they're on vacation, but then to add a bonus of legitimacy, it's coming from the Yahoo account, so it's going to say external email. That makes sense, and that looks real. But then add legitimacy, hey, I hope you can do this, and we're having a great time. And then there's a picture of the guy and his family, who that person knows, and he, is familiar, right? Because they just took that off their Facebook page, right? Or people are talking about they're on vacation at the same time, so they're making those connections. So I think the social engineering is going to get more sophisticated and more personalized, and it has been already, but that those attacks are happening at local government levels and state government levels, or small and medium-sized businesses, because bad actors have realized that they don't have the things in place like training, knowing how to trust, how to verify that information. Even if it's simple as saying, hey, not answering it and verifying it with the person in charge while the person's gone, right? Like, hey, I got this weird email, can you check? And they can text and say, yeah, and then like, I didn't send anything. And that, like, those two little steps that take 30 seconds each could save a company being, thousands of dollars being stolen. And that's happened, and it's happened a lot more during COVID because of people being remote, not having the ability to walk across to the next office or cube and verify something verbally. So they're taking advantage of that, most certainly. And I don't see that going away at any point. And then fourth, I think people are just, and I would have to blame partly the millennials that I am in, to younger generations, that it's been in their like life. Like my kids, they've never known a world without Facebook, right? And so, or social media. And so teaching them that you can't, like, this is what but these are the things you got to do to protect yourself, to be vigilant, and to like just basically stranger danger, but online, and how to protect your information and always check it and stuff. I think those are all things that will only get worse with generations to come. And I think that will be something that we'll just need to gear towards as organizations, knowing our the people that we're talking to, but also ourselves. And watch The Social Dilemma if you want to get really like freaked out, but it's on Netflix, and oh my gosh, like it's accurate to the T. And it is something that is eye-opening to any parent or any person or public figure. The Social Dilemma, I would definitely highly recommend that, because I saw that and I was like, yep, that's all accurate. And if anything, some of the things in there was understated because probably of clearances and stuff and lawsuits. But they hit it all really well. Melissa, you saw it?
Yes, I would recommend it.
Yeah. So if you're unsure about what we're saying, take it from the word of the people who developed Google and developed, Pinterest, and like the creators, because they're saying, basically, we were thinking some really great things, but we've also recognized we created a monster, and how do we kind of bring that to light to control that, right? So I would recommend definitely that, especially if you're a parent, because they go into some really good information about misinformation, how things can start as a seed and go into a full act of violence. And it really is powerful. And it's kind of what we're seeing in the news every day. So it's realistic. And I think that won't go away either. So there's my doom and gloom. But the good thing will be it's all manageable if we're vigilant and we know what we're doing. And if we don't know, we ask and we research, and we always verify with trusted sources. I think it's okay to have social media. I just think we just got to be vigilant with it and continuously be researching it. So there's a little bit of a silver lining.
There you go, silver lining. And really, it ties back to something Jennifer talked about with some of the AIM webinars. Honestly, I could see a webinar, Shatrice, I mean, as Jennifer has conversations about, how and whether to have an expert like you do a session on, okay, now you have it, kind of here's the landmines to avoid, so to speak. And so, especially as local electeds turn over, I think we're kind of in the convincing generation, maybe, of those who need to be convinced to get there. And pretty soon we'll have a generation of elected officials who have always had it, maybe could be convinced to dial it back a little bit, right? And kind of separate personal versus campaigner versus government official. Like you're wearing so many different hats. And so it's such an evergreen topic. I could certainly see that. I feel like we've just hit the tip of the iceberg as we wrap up, but I wish we could have a platform for a future conversation, because I think it is so critical for local units.
Yep. And in.gov/cybersecurity. We're going to have a blog about some tips as well. There's always some good information on there for local governments and parents and individuals, just to kind of do quick gut checks. And we're always updating that information. We're also on our website, on the social media. Ironically, we're also, but again, know your audience, right? So to Jennifer and Melissa's point. So we're always there with some good information, quick tidbits, and a little bit goes a long way. So don't feel like you have to take on the whole elephant. I think doing a little bit here and a little bit there is still better than doing nothing.
IN.gov/cybersecurity. Jennifer, for AIM's perspective, should they reach out to anyone directly, or the resources you'd like us to direct them to with this podcast?
Absolutely. They can find all of our sort of education offerings at aimindiana.org. But if they're looking for specific discussion on social media, they should just give us a call. We are very happy to help guide them through. We also do plan to have more on social media and public engagement as the year goes on, because virtual public meetings was such a popular avenue through the pandemic, that we'll be talking about that. And we have actually a workshop coming up on June 30th about virtual meetings, which we think will sort of launch additional topics in terms of technology and what's available. So we're looking forward to the discussion.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I'd love to thank our esteemed panel, Jennifer Simmons, Melissa Thomas, and Shatrice Mosley Romero. Thank you for educating me and the group, the audience, about cybersecurity, social media, and just that evolving conversation about how we use it as a tool to communicate our message while being responsible and aware of, unfortunately, some of those risks that we have with regard to social media. So as the dog takes us out here, that's right.
Sorry, I warned you.
That's
So
right.
he can be our social media mascot of the day. So that's good.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Oh my
Appreciate being
gosh,
on.
absolutely. Thank you. Follow us on social, follow this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can watch this also on YouTube. And thanks for listening to Days of Our Cyber Lives on the Indiana Bond Bank Bondcast. Thank you all.